Hello, everybody. It's 6:01. I'm sure we may still have some people continue to join us, but thought I might go ahead and get us started here real quick. Um, my name's Matt Taylor. I'm an architect with Studio 8 Design. I think you all got a letter from us about this project. We have several of our team members here with us today as well. Devin McClendon is our project manager for NAI and helping as a client representative. Adam Sager is our civil engineer who's helping with all of our site issues. Jennifer Atcher and Davis Phillips are architects with me at Studio 8 Design. And we're going to walk you through our proposed text amendment for the Envision Franklin plan here. And then we've got about 35 minutes at the end open for questions and answers. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Devin to kick us off and introduce the project.
Okay. I think so.
There we go. Matt, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful.
Fine.
So first of all, good evening, everybody. My name is Devin McClendon, and I am the Chief Executive of NAI Nashville and Stanton Group. We are a Williamson County-based commercial real estate firm. I'm a Williamson County native, and I happen to be serving as the owner's representative for this project. I'm going to step away a little bit, kind of maybe non-traditionally, from our text amendment to the Envision Franklin part, which is really what we're here about. But I wanted to share a little bit of the background on why we're doing this or what got us here. And that is that our client purchased the Handy Hardware building almost 3 years ago. At that point, really, the intention was then, let's find a good use for it, probably for office, and move on. And as we did that, we realized that as the building sat, we would not have enough parking within the current requirements to use it as it was. It would require some additional retail to be added, and thus we wouldn't be able to make any project work. So we tabled the idea for just a short period and said, look, let's develop some goals. So what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of background on what it is we're trying to do, or let's just say the big picture. And that is with this text amendment and hopefully a resulting project, our client said, look, the very first thing we want to do is preserve the Handy Hardware building. And we want to do it if at all possible. So if there's ways to work around it, if we have to spend a little extra time, working to get, some kind of agreement with staff in the community to do that, let's take that time and do it. The second really primary objective was to create a project that would end up becoming a little bit of a buffer between the adjacent neighborhood and Columbia Avenue. Columbia Avenue being almost a designated arterial in and out of downtown, to create something that would give a little bit of a buffer. The third was, once we got into the Handy Hardware site and the adjacent sites, which we've been able to acquire, is to honor the history of the site beyond just the hardware store, but looking back a little further to Mr. Farnsworth, and then even further beyond that to the Redmond family, which is one of Franklin's very first entrepreneurial African-American families. Then when we got down to the building itself, our two objectives were to build a product that would be around hundreds of years from now. So if it took a little extra time and took a little extra money, our client didn't want to take on something that would be cheaply or poorly constructed. And finally, as we really got into it, it had to be a project that did I kind of say did no evil, meaning it could not add any parking to the neighborhood. The entire project, whatever we ended up on, had to completely 100% contain any parking required for it. So we've persevered and done that. We've spent nearly 2 years trying to come up with some things. And as we got down to it, what we realized was in order to meet those objectives, primarily the preservation of handy hardware, we needed to go back and look at what the limits of the Envision Franklin guiding document was. And that's why we're here today. So that's what I've got. I'll be around at the end for questions, but I'm going to hand it back. I believe, Matt, you're going to take it from here.
Actually, we're going to hand off to Adam, I think, and let him talk about the site work first.
Yeah, that'd be good. You got me, Matt?
Gotcha.
Yeah, thank you guys, and good to be here. My name's Adam Sager. I'm a civil engineer with Dale and Associates. I live and work here in Franklin, done other projects around downtown, and I'm familiar with the area. One thing I want to do is kind of explain why we're here tonight. It's for Envision Franklin. Yes, we have a project and properties that we are looking at, but Envision Franklin is the purpose of tonight's meeting. And some of you may be very familiar with it. If anybody on the call is not, Envision Franklin is, I would look at it as sort of a guiding principle document, so that as we look at an area of the town, what is the use? What is the aesthetic? How does it function? How does it work together with the community around it? And so it's a guiding principle document to kind of help shape and drive how Franklin gets developed as we move along. And so that's kind of the level that we're looking at tonight's presentation. This isn't the time and the place to get down in the weeds and the details. It's more about understanding where we are in Franklin and what would work and who our neighbors are and how this fits in. And so it's not just us looking at our property alone. It's also our property looking out and saying, how do we relate to everyone around us? And so as you're looking at the map right now, the blue is the project site. If I can help familiarize people, if you don't see it right away, but the blue coming into the right side of it, right where it says the word project, that's Margin Street. And then just across the street there, the police headquarters is 9th Avenue. And then just to the south of us is the newer bank building, Renaissance Bank. And right on the bottom side of Renaissance is Blackburn Street. And so if you hear us say Blackburn, that's the south side. Margin is kind of in the middle, north, and then Church Street is at the very top above a couple properties we don't own. So that's where we are in the world. You can go to the next slide. These are a few pictures of what you would see today. And so the top three are all taken from Columbia. The bottom three are all taken from Cummins. And so Columbia is the north-south street that's on our left side of the property, and Cummins is on the right side. Everybody's very familiar with Columbia. You know what it looks like and feels like as you go up and down it. And we're going to be addressing Columbia. That is the main face of the project. And I'm going to come back to the street lights here in just a second. But before I do that, I want you to notice the ones at the bottom. This is on the back side along Cummins Avenue. Cummins, the block length from Columbia to Cummins is so short that what's happened over the years is a lot of these businesses have put their front door onto Columbia and kind of their back end onto Cummins. And so it's kind of created this alley feel, if you will. It is a public street, but yet people park on it like it's an alley. There's dumpsters back there. There was automotive service buildings here, and so there's a lot of cars just kind of parked up and down. There's no sidewalk there on that side of the road. And so I want you also to notice along Cummins, there's those overhead power lines. You can see those in the picture, and just kind of has a back door sort of feel. Now, if you go across the street to Cummins, and some of you on the call tonight might be some of the neighbors along Cummins, the other side of Cummins has front doors on it. There's a couple newer houses there, a couple businesses. And so the opposite side of Cummins has kind of a front door appearance, but yet the opposite side of the street where we're on, where our property is, has kind of a backdoor feel. And we want to correct that. That's us kind of looking at the community and saying, hey, let's look at this project from all fronts. And like Devin alluded to, it's taken, some time, but we feel that we're addressing this property from every angle from the community's perspective. And then you can go to the next slide. I'll make just a few more points on the site. So this is the property we're looking at. The white is the building area that we have in consideration. The kind of brown red in between are pedestrian plazas. Matt and Jennifer are going to go more into that. And then you can see kind of in the center there is existing Handy Hardware. That building is to remain in its state there. One thing I want to bring back up are the stoplights. As you travel up and down Columbia Avenue, you hit this offset intersection with 9th Avenue and Margin, and 2 stoplights have been put there. And from a traffic standpoint, that's pretty efficient to have an offset intersection with 2 stoplights. And so if any of you have ever maneuvered through, like take a left off of 9th and you come onto Columbia and then you're right into another stoplight, that's somewhat inefficient. And so what we're going to do, because we have the ability with all of these properties, is to close off the Margin Street access. And I know that, might sound like oh, that's kind of significant, but really it's going to help push that offset onto a secondary street so that Columbia can operate much more fluently. And then it will reduce 1 stoplight there. So you have 1 stoplight at 9th Avenue, and then we'll carry on 9th Avenue through the project and then see it into Cummins. And so it's really a similar configuration, but we offset the switchback kind of onto a side street rather than the main street. We believe that would be better for traffic flow. And it also creates an opportunity along Margin there to have a pedestrian plaza as well. So that's one thing, is the stoplights. Number 2 is Cummins Street. It's not a great street to walk up right now, but yet, like I said, everybody on the right side of it has businesses or homes. And so we want to begin to reestablish Cummins Street. We want to pretty it up. We want to make it walkable. And so on our side of the property, what we'll do is put in some street trees, curb and gutter, sidewalk, make it look like a street frontage and not just the back end of somebody. And finally, to help that is those electric lines. So starting down there on the south end of Blackburn Street, we've met with Middle Tennessee Electric. We've met with the City of Franklin Utilities. And what we anticipate doing is burying those electrical lines from Blackburn all the way up to 5 Points. And so that'll be quite an undertaking to start at Blackburn Street and then bury all of those electrical lines all the way up to where 5 Points is, kind of close to Frothy Monkey. It goes off the page. And so that'll be a pretty good undertaking. But in the wake of that, there will be electrical lines all underneath the street, new pavement in the road, new utilities, and just freshen the whole place up. And so I think I'll stop there. That's all the site stuff. That's what we deal with. And from there, I know everybody's excited to look at the building, so I'll hand it back off to Matt and Jennifer, and you guys can take it from the project itself.
Thanks, Adam. So as Adam mentioned, we're really talking about the Envision Franklin plan tonight. And for those of you that are familiar with it, you may have also seen that the city has just released an update, a proposed draft update, because they update it every 5 years to refine some things and what they've learned over the past time and fix certain areas. So as we've looked at this, the Envision Franklin plan is an overall vision for how the city wants to create special places in Franklin and enhance the built environment and help steer the growth into what method that everybody can be proud of and love to live in. Within that, there are design concepts, and the design concepts talk about different types of development that are appropriate for different parts of town. Our project is considered a neighborhood mixed use design concept. And within that, there are special considerations that are sub areas within the design concept areas that have been identified in town. So what we've been looking at is we're in the special consideration area for Polk Street to oh, Jennifer, remind me. Let's see. We're
5 points to Folks.
5 points to Polk Street, right? And so the changes that we are proposing to make, we can go ahead and I think go to the next slide here. Yeah, here we go. We're in the mixed use neighborhood design concept and located in the Columbia Avenue between 5 Points and Folk Street special consideration area. So we're proposing to change the special consideration area only so that it doesn't affect other mixed use neighborhood concepts in Franklin and become a big global change, because we're really looking at what's specific to this site and this area. And the main objective is to add some height to the building, but in a very sensitive manner. The Envision Franklin allows for larger projects to consider additional height. We are a larger project. We have proposed to update the wording where new development can be 2 stories in height and may include another 1.5 floors above that along Columbia Avenue, excuse me, Columbia Avenue and West Folk Street. A recessed step back would be required from the 2 stories so that you don't create too much of a towering facade. And that's for only for buildings 3 floors or above. The remaining 3 bullet points, there's a map in the existing Envision Franklin plan that in the update is being removed, and the transitions being addressed between commercial buildings and parking areas requirement and historically significant buildings that contribute to the overall character, such as the Handy Hardware building. Those 3 bullet points are already in the city's proposed draft for the update. So the new element that we are adding is the top point. The pictures that you see along the bottom are pictures that are in the Envision Franklin document now that depict what the vision for neighborhood mixed use development and construction could look like. Some of these areas you'll recognize around Franklin, but they are there to help give some visual graphics to the words. But you can see what we have there now won't really doesn't look like that. And as Devin mentioned early, what we've realized in the current plan, in order to meet all of the requirements that are stipulated, including parking and the frontage along Columbia Avenue, there isn't enough site area for most of those sites along the stretch, with the exception of the H.G. Hill property, because it's so much larger. So in order to help us meet the vision, the extra height helps, and then we have enough mass area to the project to be able to park all of it, potentially going underground, so that we don't create any parking overflow in the neighborhood, and we protect the neighborhood and become that buffer between residential and Columbia Avenue that Devin talked about. Jennifer, let's go to the next slide. So what does that mean to have a 3rd floor or a floor with a step back? Here are some examples right around Franklin. Everybody is familiar with Main Street. And you can see we have quite a few 3-story buildings right along Main Street. The scale is something that's appropriate to Franklin. We're on the northern end of Columbia Avenue, and by creating a more walkable area along Cummins Street and Columbia, we anticipate more of a pedestrian connection to Main Street. And so we wanted to show that you can see several 3-story buildings along this block. This happens to be between the Square and 4th Avenue. The building on the left is a 2-story building with an attic. That would be a potential half-story, where you have the mass and the feel of a 2-story building, but there may be a little bit of loft space in the upper areas of that building. but it blends right in with the character of the rest of the streets and the streetscape there. The 231 Public Square building used to be the old First Tennessee Bank building on the square, is one that we actually worked on with Adam, and the top floor of that behind the parapet is stepped back. So you can see how it holds the edge, where this is a 3-story building, which was the original structure of the old building. And then the top floor steps back so that from the sidewalk and the street, when you're driving by, it's not as tall, even though it does allow for some extra height and use within the footprint of the building. To the right is the proposed new city hall on the square. You can see that is also executing some of these same techniques, with the 231 building on the left of its the rendering and the sketch there, and 3 floors up on the square where it's more appropriate and helps transition between 231 and the historic courthouse. The bottom row are really buildings right across the street from our site to show the context of what we're working in. The Franklin Police Headquarters building has a large earth berm that slopes up to the front door, but there's a 3rd floor below that you can see when you drive down 9th on either side, and it daylights to the back. So it is a 3-story building in height right across the street. And then we have the bank building that y'all may be familiar with. You see the hexagonal tower on the corner of the bottom right photo. That is literally across a portion of our site as well, that is 2-story with a 3-story building immediately behind it facing 9th Avenue. So these heights already exist in the context of our site in order to help accomplish the preservation of handy hardware and the parking goals and meet all the city requirements. This change allows us to bring this site where we can build what the vision already articulates and sets in place for the future of Franklin growth. With that, Jennifer, I'm going to hand off to you and let you talk a little bit about our project.
Sure. I would, before we switch to the next slide, would also point out that as Studio 8, you may have heard our name before. We are working on the City Hall project. We did 231 Grays, and we're heavily involved in the police headquarters building as well. So we are Franklin. We're located in Nashville, but Matt lives in Franklin. We feel like we're a part of the community, and we understand the vision of what Franklin aspires to be. You know, the history is there, and we want to keep that going.
Yeah.
And
it's our backyard too.
So I think Matt touched on our next talking point by looking at the bottom row of buildings here, which are just across the street from our site. We say 3.5 stories, and I know height can be a sensitive subject, but showing you this is a site section to hopefully allay any fears. The police headquarters, as Matt mentioned, it has a 2-story frontage, but this berm here actually is hiding the bottom floor. And then there is a penthouse on top of the police headquarters as well. What we're proposing on our site would be shorter than the police headquarters building. So even though it is a 3.5-story building, and along Columbia, you could call the police headquarters a 2-story building, in actuality, the heights are very comparable, and we feel like this building would fit in contextually along Columbia Avenue. So again, can you guys see my mouse at all? Okay. So police headquarters section cut. This is our proposed building, this Columbia Commons. And then what you're seeing here is the condos at Margin and Commons there in the distance. And then I think the last point that we do want to talk through is that, yes, we have done some concept studies. We do not have a designed building. So unfortunately, some conceptual sketches is what we have to offer right now. It's a balance of making sure we're going to be allowed to do it before we present any hardline design moving forward. So instead, we just want to leave you with some of the feel of what we're looking to create in here. It's been touched upon many times. Our goal is to have Handy Hardware be the jewel of this project. The rendering that you're seeing here is actually what an entrance could look like into this new plaza that's along where we're cutting off Margin. So this is Cummins Street here. You arrive traveling west
Best.
on Margin, and you can see some of the streetscape that Adam was talking about. Trees, no more power lines, a real walkability feel, and a connection to the neighborhood to the east. As was mentioned before, it would be a 2-story facade, building frontage along Cummins, and then you can see that 3rd-story height in the distance, but set back so it's not overwhelming. And then below, just some photos of how we envision the feel of the project. And then lastly, a few more images. This is a quick rendered sketch of Columbia, this being Handy Hardware. And you can see contextually these buildings fit height-wise right in with what's already existing on Columbia Avenue. I think that covers our portion.
That's what we have to share in the way of a current update. Devin, is there anything you want to sort of close with, and then we can open it up for any questions?
Yeah, because that mostly I think it's probably on the minds of everybody, and it's what are we thinking? Like, what is our brainstorm as to what these buildings will be? Because I think that matters. And while we've called them mixed use, our intent is truly to make it a live, work, play. So our first 4 planned would be exclusive to retail and office, with quieter we'll say non-noise retail being on the Cummins Street side, in order to protect a little bit of a sound buffer. We do have some restaurants that we would love, restaurant spots we would love to have on the Columbia Avenue side and internal. The 2nd floor right now, we would really dream up to be an office use. And then the 3rd floor, that floor that is stepped back, that really almost hides itself from someone on the street, would be residential, and that would be condominiums. We've ruled out anything related to apartments. The condominium element of the project would be very exclusive. Right now, we're somewhere between 10 and 18 condos in terms of just, the sheer amount of space we have. And to give you a little bit of an idea, we're thinking a price range that's going to exceed that of the brownstones. So very high-end market, very private to some extent, but certainly condos that would have access to that area that we see stepped back that would then be private. So that's that. Jennifer, if you want to go to that final slide, I can kind of, wrap up with, we've been very particular with the goals of our clients, that the preservation of Handy was first and foremost to create a project that not only added value to the neighborhood, but also ended up acting as a buffer, to park everything within the project, to as I mentioned earlier, do no evil, and then obviously to celebrate the heritage and the history of the site, back beyond just what the buildings you see now. To go back further and to really celebrate and make note of that history. So from here, our team is open to questions if folks have them. Matt, I don't know if you want to be our MC and field those, and then each of us can answer them as needed.
Sure.
But we're all here, as you've seen, and certainly don't mind getting specific where we're able.
Do you want us to type the questions in the chat so you have that history, or do you want us to just ask them?
I think we'll do whatever's easiest for you all. I know some folks are well versed in Zoom after the last few years, but others don't use it every day, and the chat may be a little confusing.
Yeah.
So we welcome.
Matt, if I can
the
make
chat
a
box.
recommendation.
So
I'll make a recommendation because we do a lot of these. Is that Matt? If you want to, like Devin said, if you want to be the MC and field questions, and then people can unmute themselves and ask, and just kind of have, you know, courtesy if somebody else is talking, try to be respectful of that. And if somebody else is talking and you do have a question, then type it in the chat, and then we can it kind of helps organize the thought process and the conversation. So Matt, I'll go off now until somebody has a question from my side, but that's usually a pretty good format.
Well, Adam, this first question might be one for you to help answer. Vicky's asking, what's the plan for traffic flow from Margin Street to Columbia? So
yeah, that's a great question. And so there you go, that one right there. So today you come on Margin Street. If you're heading westbound, you would hit the stop sign, cross Cummins, and go straight to a stoplight, at which point you would take a right or a left. It's a T intersection. So you have a right-left option. If you were to want to continue on 9th Avenue, what would happen is you can no longer go straight. You would take a left there at Margin, take a right onto 9th, come through the new 9th Street, and down. There you go, right through there. That will help direct traffic through one stoplight instead of two offset intersections. If you're going northbound, you would take a right on Cummins anyway and head up to Church Street. And if you're heading southbound, it's likely you would want to get to a light. Studies show more people want to take a left on a major road at a stoplight. And so if you're trying to head southbound on Columbia, rather than go up to the light, turn left, and then hit another light right away, you would take your left, take your right onto the new 9th Street, and then take a left onto Columbia. And so it's really the same traffic movement. If I could draw a line, you can see an offset from 9th, Columbia to Margin. It's just moved over one block. So it's really the same movement. It's just moved over to where Cummins Street now absorbs the offset rather than Columbia. Yeah, so if you would take that same blue line and then move it to the right, it's the same. Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, something like that. Does that help, Vicky? Does that answer it?
I have a question if you can hear me.
we can hear you, Amy.
Okay, good. My computer sometimes doesn't work. So what assurance is that going to give us that this rerouting Margin Street is not going to increase the traffic down where I live on Cummins Street? You know, what's to make somebody, if they were going to go south, not continue down Cummins Street and go on to Phillips to go to Columbia? And how does that 9th Street compare to the current Margin? Like right now, you know, it's not really a street right there. Is it going to be as wide as Margin is that people are going to want to come down that way, or would it be continue on Cummins Street?
We lost a little bit of what you said there towards the end, but I think we will be doing a traffic study to confirm with the uses and the traffic flow of what's happening. As Adam said, by eliminating the two lights so close to each other, that's something that we wouldn't really even be allowed to do now along Columbia with the light at Margin and the light at 9th Avenue. We're cleaning up that intersection to be a more straightforward, simple four-way stop that allows for some longer queuing if it needs to be, and you don't have to. The shorter turns are more within the neighborhood and will really be for the neighbors. because we're not making it as easy to cut through the residential neighborhood as to get to Columbia to get to where you need to from either the north, south, or west.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would add
think
that,
Go
Amy,
ahead.
your question was about assurances. And I'm not sure there's any assurance that we can make as it relates to forcing traffic patterns. So I'm not the engineer in the room. I'll let Adam answer that specifically, but I would guess that by having margin end at Cummins, it becomes less of a desired cut through. Over time, it will likely lower the traffic count on margin. But more importantly, it provides a good left-hand turn light on Columbia. So where there might be concern by some that live south of margin on Cummins, of it continuing down on Cummins, Cummins as a street will not get wider. It will be more walkable. We will be adding a sidewalk to it. So it will not feel like a pass through. It will feel more like you're going down Main Street through the square and beyond 4th and into 5 Points. So the tree lined, the planters, the sidewalk should help change the feel of Cummins, while at the same time allowing that right turn from margin to, or left from margin to Cummins and right from Cummins to 9th, so that there's that good light there. Someone who traveled further south to Blackburn, for example, wouldn't have that stoplight left turn. Adam, did I miss anything there?
No, I mean, you're right. There's no way that anybody can predict or provide assurances how anybody on this call is even going to drive. We can't, nobody can do that. But what you do is you take traffic patterns and you extrapolate and project into the future. And when you get to this configuration, you have today one cut through from margin to Columbia. And tomorrow, if this project were to be built, you have one cut through. It just is one block south onto 9th. And so the access and the cut through of margin and redirecting of current traffic patterns ought not to change really noticeably. If anything, Columbia Avenue would be a more efficient route for people to stay on Columbia rather than to divert, is typically what you would see here. But like Devin mentioned, if we were to propose this as a new project today with no roads around you and you were to reconstruct all these roads, we wouldn't even be allowed to have 2 stoplights where they are. And so it's really a measure of cleaning up the efficiency of the traffic patterns in the area.
Yeah, I think making Columbia easier will help keep people on Columbia and out of the neighborhood then as well. Bruno posted a question in the chat. I want to read this, that he lives at 219 Cummins, so right across the street from us, and has 2 concerns. One, that we'll be diverting all parking and traffic onto Cummins and in front of his house. And 2, 3.5 stories will block my afternoon sun at about 2:30 p.m. It'll also set the precedent to have my property staring at a wall of buildings as development. Bruno, I'll share with you. I think we've really focused a lot on Cummins Street because, can we shift to the street section or site section, Jennifer? So the 2 stories, it isn't that tall. We've already got 2 stories and 3 stories along the building, along Columbia for sure. Handy Hardware is 2 stories. We've been really looking at the context of Cummins from the standpoint of cleaning it up and making it a much more pleasant place to be, so that when you walk out your front door, you really have a front yard. You're not staring at the utilities and the dumpsters and the cars that are parked that may or may not be fixed sometime in the next 30 days or so, and gravel lots and people parked on the sidewalk. I think we're stepping the building back to allow some of those sun angles to continue to come through and cleaning up the utilities and the streetscape so that I think there will be more daylight than you think. But in terms of having buildings, you'll really be fronting a better street instead of fronting an alley in the backs of buildings. The buildings that will front Cummins will have some of that neighborhood retail that would be places that we would anticipate families wanting to walk to instead of having to go drive and park somewhere to grab a cup of coffee to do.
Matt, if I can layer in what you said, I think it's important also to remind people why we're here and what we're requesting is that if you go into the code today, there is what we can build is like a 2-story on Columbia and a 3-story on Cummins. And that's kind of why we're here. We're wanting to shift that and we're wanting to shift the 3-story feel towards Columbia and take it away from Cummins. And so we're heading in that direction. If we go with the code as it stands today, and somebody were to come along and build a single building on Cummins, it has the allowance to go up to 3 stories. Mm-hmm. And so by adding that step back, we're kind of actually reducing the allowance of what already exists today. And the main focus of why we're here today, again, for Envision Franklin, the overall view is really more from a Columbia perspective. That's kind of how we're tinkering with it. Not that it's going to make your life perfect, Bruno, but I'm just trying to help explain why we're doing what we're doing. And the reason why we have that step back is because we're trying to be sensitive to that side of the street as well.
Right.
And Matt, I'll add, Bruno, particularly to your point about parking, and I think Matt addressed a little bit of that, is we will not be creating a project that should dump any cars onto Cummins. As it sits now, there is no parking allowed on Cummins Street. There is no allocation for it. Parallel is not allowed. Parking on the sidewalk is certainly not allowed. And by improving the overall street, our goal would be to stop any parking on Cummins. We will have more than enough spaces as a part of our project to be able to house any car plus others if it were to be needed. Hopefully that helps.
I want to make sure we address, because we've had a couple other questions get added in the chat here. So Debbie had asked, Evans Street is already an alley and a speed zone. How will they be affected? Will there be speed bumps or one-way traffic added to Evans? Jennifer, we might have to go to the site overall context. And Debbie, I'm going to apologize to you. I'm not exactly sure where Evans is.
Evans is along the right side, Matt, and I can answer that one. Speed bumps and one-way traffic are things that we are open to as we move forward. Again, we're talking more about the aesthetic and feel of the project right now. Those will definitely be addressed. When it comes to speed bumps, that's something that the city of Franklin has to approve. It's a little bit out of our control, but that's definitely something that we can look at. And what was the other one? Speed bumps and
speed bumps or one-way traffic.
One-way traffic. Yeah, that's something that comes out when the traffic study is formally submitted to Franklin. That is underway. We do have a traffic engineer engaged, and they are working on the traffic study as we speak. And so as the project materializes and gets submitted to Franklin, those are items that will be considered.
Yeah. So Ed posted a question, will the buildings help shield Cummins Street from Columbia Avenue street noise? Will it become not just more walkable, but also a quieter walk? I would absolutely anticipate that being the case, Ed, with having more building mass there. We do want some transparency so that you can walk and not just get walled off and blocked out, but the building will certainly present much more of a noise barrier than anything that's built along this stretch of property now, because everything else is either one story or open gravel parking lot and lots of alley space and space in between some of those from parking lots that are not allowed to be built today.
Matt, I can step in and address kind of two of the questions. I think Debbie followed up and just explained about probably some of the frustration from being adjacent to a restaurant that's a legacy building. And then Amy about prohibiting on-street parking. And I mentioned that a little bit, so I won't belabor the point, but by improving Cummins and providing a curb and gutter on each side, a sidewalk on each side, and bringing the feel of it with trees and landscaping and a wider sidewalk on this east side, you actually force it to be only the 2 lanes and not 2 plus a little bit, where it's really now treated more like an alley where people, I mean, I was there yesterday and someone, like 2 or 3 people parked with half their car over the sidewalk. So by having more of a presence, you reduce the likelihood of that being there. And by having tenants, our management company, ever present, you're able to enforce that a whole lot more efficiently and effectively. So while you can't stop somebody from pulling up on a sidewalk, I think the changes we're making would reduce or completely stop that. As it relates to parking, there would be right now, there would be no parking on the street. We will have, at a bare minimum, 100% of the spaces needed in the garage. I think depending on how we do, it may even be more than 100% of the needed spaces. If we're going to engage in building a garage within this, we want to make sure that there is no spillover. We watched as y'all as a neighborhood, we'll say, managed the process of the original proposal at O'Moore, and we heard, and that was a very strong motivating factor for us.
Yeah, Devin, I would add too, in the design of the improved streetscape improvements along Cummins, by adding street trees and some planters, you really prohibit cars from being able to park on the sidewalk like they do now, because we have obstacles in the way that actually add to the character and enhancement of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Christy said these are likely for future consideration, but if you have any feedback on these now, they'd appreciate it. Mitigation for construction annoyances, dust, dirt, debris, power service outages. We work from home, and outages of any sort, cable, internet, power, interfere with our ability to conduct business. Plans for noise abatement, plans for traffic flow and construction traffic. I can say we realize we have a tight site and a lot of people around us, and we don't have any backside. We have a lot of fronts. So we are aware of that, and we are including a contractor in the team to help us with pre-construction planning and budgeting and design, so that he can think about where are we storing materials and how are we going to do this. Adam said some of those conversations with Middle Tennessee Electric too, in the spirit of how the utilities will be buried. We're too early in the project to give you any firm answers on it yet, though.
And Matt, I would include, and I think it's worth it at this time, our general contractor is a Williamson County based firm. So reputation matters. They have a long history in Middle Tennessee, and they live here as well. So they care, and we will absolutely work hand in hand with you to be as little of a disturbance as possible.
Right. Amy asked how long we anticipate the length of construction, and do we know the hours of construction? Will anything be done to minimize noise dust? So following up on Christy's question, the city will prescribe some of that within their zoning ordinances and when work can happen and can't happen. We don't have a length of construction yet because we're so preliminary in the project so far that we're at this stage to figure out, can we build what we think we hope to build, and then we can flesh out the design and get a lot of those details worked out. So we're still a good ways off of breaking any ground on this to go through the initial approvals with the city on this.
Matt, do we have do you know offhand the established hours that construction's allowed?
I don't, Devin.
There is a regulated window. So obviously within that, and then, any ability we have to manipulate that even lower where it's possible, of course, would certainly be considered.
Right. Let's see. Vicky asked if we had any thoughts on making Cummins one way to help with traffic. I don't think we have any plans for that now, and it wouldn't be something that we would necessarily decide. It would be something more left up to the city. Was that right, Adam? If that came out of the traffic study as a recommendation,
Yeah.
I don't know that we have any objection to it, but
Right. I mean, we want to try to accommodate and do what we can when you come to speed bumps, traffic patterns, things like that. The city traffic engineers are going to consider more of a regional impact on that. It is not as easy as just making a street a one-way. And so, again, I mean, I don't think we're necessarily opposed to it, but it's really derived from the city and what is the most efficient way to direct traffic in the area. And it would come through them.
Let's see. JP is asking, I get it regarding parking. He's asking if the parking garage entrance will be across from him. We're still working out the flow of the parking garage based on what happens above it and the basic structural systems. So I don't have a firm answer for you just yet on that, JP. Devin, is there anything on parking garage relative to that you want to add?
No, we'd like to keep it as easy for ingress and egress as possible. Obviously, that minimizes scrapes and accidents, things like that. But we just don't know yet. What we do know is it cannot enter on Columbia Avenue. Engineering would say no, and no. But everywhere else, we're trying to figure out where that best spot is.
Christy had asked, lastly, estimated project timing, proposed start date, and of course, depending on approvals as well as project duration. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we don't have a handle on project duration yet because it depends on what changes going through the approvals process. I think the earliest start date would be third, fourth quarter next year, right, Devin?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on how this process goes, but at this point, I think the earliest we start, substantial work would be, I think third quarter is probably pretty accurate at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't figure you knew much, but it was worth asking. I live in the condos and I've probably seen you and your guys out there. I have the nice patio back there. So I've been curious as to what y'all are doing, but
well, next time wave at us if you see us wandering around.
if you want a nice tea.
I understand. And look, I think particularly for y'all, we've been very, very particular about making sure we're not creating something that is, has a really negative impact because y'all are right there. I mean, more than anyone else here, y'all will feel the good or well, there won't be any bad. But y'all will feel it. So
2 years that you're doing the work, but yes.
Yeah, I think what you can be assured of, because Matt lives in Franklin, I live here in Williamson County, Adam lives here in Williamson County, our GC lives in Williamson County, is that we'll sit down and have kind of smaller direct impact meetings as we get ready for construction, so that there is a very active line of communication. And you kind of not only know what's going on when in the process, but that you know all of us and can say, hey guys, I know you said no dust, but I'm getting dust. What can we do?
Yeah, I mean,
It'll matter.
yeah, if you can promise me no dust, we'll be best friends. I get that. I've built many houses.
I don't know if I can
But-
commit the contractor to that 100%, but I can say it whether he believes me or not.
Right. No, yeah, and I appreciate those smaller focus groups. I currently manage the HOA here, and we've got a lot of folks here that are concerned about it, of course. I
Yep.
just want to make sure that we have very open lines of communications. We're all reasonable. We just need to be able to continue to live our lives. And as I mentioned in a previous comment, like I can't have my power out and I can't have my internet out because that interferes with my ability to conduct business as well. So we'll talk through those as part of those small groups, but feel free to ask anybody to come over. You guys have been out there 1,000 times. I'm sure you know which condo is mine, since I said I have the screened in patio. So come over, knock on my door. I'm here all the time. Happy to talk to y'all.
Great.
Awesome.
I want to just point out we have about 3 to 5 minutes left. I think we could probably go over a little bit long if we needed to, but we also have about 6 questions. So
Matt,
I'm going to try to jump on them and get people some answers if we can.
Hey, Matt,
Yes, sir.
this is Jerry Pewitt. I don't know how to type in any questions, but if there's an option to be able to have some interjection, I'd like to be able to talk at some point in time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me sort of jump into the order here, but I promise you we'll give you a few minutes here. I just want to make sure we don't ignore anyone. And forgive me, I'm going off screen name. So Haddock had a question about, is there a setback on the Cummins side as well as the Columbia side? Yes, there is up above. Alderman Baggett asked, is Handy Hardware, and he said, I know it is, but Handy Hardware in the historic overlay, what lengths have we gone to in order to preserve the historic structure? Is this important to the developer? I will tell you, this is the most important factor in the project, to the point that we've even studied the soils around Handy Hardware to make sure that when we go underground with parking, we are staying a minimum of 10 feet off of that, with the recommendation of our structural engineer, shoring everything up and working the parking garage around the footprint of the historic structure so that it is saved, it's preserved. We want it to be the really special part of this. And we feel like one of the things that makes this truly a Franklin project and a local project is the preservation of Handy Hardware, and not just scraping things and building something new. That it's important to keep that history and heritage and let that weave into the story of the overall project. Gary asked, do I understand correctly that you're proposing to remove all parallel parking on Cummins, even for existing businesses that use the parallel spots? Gary, right now, I don't think there is any actual parallel parking. There's just people parking on the sidewalk and in the gravel lots.
Yeah, I would add any built, particularly on the northern end of Cummins, we're not going to be making any street changes up there. So for those businesses, the way they're parking now, they would be able to use the gravel inset where they are. Now, when they redevelop, they're likely going to have to put sidewalk in. And then on the other side, on the east side of Cummins, on the north part, folks are literally parking on the sidewalk. So that's an allowance. They're I guess I don't know what the rules are on that. If it's in front of your house, it's allowed or not. But we won't be impacting that area. Just the area where we begin at Handy Hardware on the west side down to where Renaissance Bank begins.
Debbie asked about the hangar building where the old Franklin Heating and Cooling business was. That's the arched building. We kind of call it the Bow Trust building. It will go away as part of this project. We've done a lot of looking at that building and ways to preserve it, but we can't. It's really in some bad shape, bad need of repair. The roof has been leaking like a sieve for a very long time, and the trusses are rotting. Stormwater, whenever it rains heavily, it flows into the building because the back door is lower than the street is, and there's no curb and gutter to catch it. And there's no way to work around it and work around Handy, and Handy has been really so much the crown jewel that it has taken the priority of what we've been able to save in the project.
And Matt, I'll add to Debbie, we spent a lot of money throwing a new roof on it to try to protect the wood in there, only to then realize that it's not salvageable from a structural standpoint of, to be able to make it viable. Combine that with the fact that it just loves to absorb water from the street. It really isn't. I wanted to save that one. That one is, I love the look of it, but it's not possible. It cannot be commercially viable.
Had asked about underground water flow, if there's excavation for underground parking. We are going through a lot of very extensive geotechnical studies of the site with borings as well as radar mapping to figure out what the subsurface conditions are. And we're waiting for some of those reports to come back. We anticipate that there may be areas where there's some water, but we are prepared to deal with it and solve that so that it's not a problem and definitely doesn't create any problem beyond our site as well. The police headquarters building ran into the same thing with the floor that is below grade, and we're able to solve for that and kind of help protect the neighborhood around it as well. Amy asked about, can we get copies of the concept renderings and images for the proposed project? I would say at this point, we have those character sketches, but we don't have renderings of the proposed project that are ready to be released. We did want to give you an idea of what we have in mind. But I can also tell you, we are frantically working late into every night, working on getting this done within what we know we can do with the city right now, and that will be a big part of at this feedback that we get from you all and from the city is going to help us shape that so that we can finish developing this design. JP had a comment that I like the personal nature of the small groups. And let's see, Jerry, let me go ahead and open this up for you to for your feedback as well.
Okay, is that for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, first of all, to Devin, Matt, Adam, and Jennifer, thank you for y'all's time you've spent on this and introducing this project tonight. I appreciate that. It's a very nice project. Just to introduce myself, I apologize. It says JD Stevens on probably my screen. I'm at a friend's house because I'm not very computer literate. But my name is Jerry Pewitt, and I'm the trustee of the Clyde Pewitt Family Trust.
Mm-hmm.
And the family trust, the family has lived in Franklin all of my life. And we're a multi-generational family of Williamson County. So we really are part of the Franklin history, as y'all talk about the Franklin history here. We own the property just north of this project that you're proposing. You may can go back to your slide, but I can show it on this. Our project is here. Yeah, it's just the project so the overlay that you're talking about that comes from 5 Points all the way down to Folk Street, we're between 5 Points and you.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So that's where we're located.
I think Jennifer's pointing to your property with her cursor there, if y'all can see that.
Yes,
there it is.
Yeah,
with the circle.
Right. Yes. And we have no objections to the underground parking. And in fact, I think we should promote the underground parking on the entire block.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to explore ways to facilitate the underground parking on the entire area so that it encompasses that overlay sooner than later, if we possibly can. I understand there is presently there's no underground parking requirement that would, I think if looking at my notes, that might impact underground parking in this area. Okay, and I understand that there's a 10-foot setback requirement from the property line in an underground parking garage, as I understand that. However, in this case, it could reduce and limit the area for underground parking, not only for your project property, but also for the adjacent properties north to your property of development. Y'all also have that other property that's just south of me. If she circled that one, there's another property that y'all own. I think your people own right there in that one. And then there's the Woodard property, and then there's your property there, if I understand that correctly. So my thought would be to formulate policies that would permit additional underground parking space by eliminating the underground parking setback requirement. And this would permit connectivity between underground parking garages in that area and permit the sharing of the ramps in there. Of course, the rationale behind this is this should be encourage uniform height in that whole block from your project north. It's in that whole overlay. Continue to promote that, the 3.5 story idea that you have. And the idea is for Main Street height to be extended up to Columbia Avenue. So it would include, that whole idea that you're trying to do in order to uniform the 3.5 stories to extend up Columbia Avenue from Main Street. All the buildings on the north side of the block between South Marsden and Church will need underground parking. Because of the smaller size of these lots, when you have the one south of that, and of course the property that we have, it's necessary policy to change this, looks like to us, be appropriate to eliminate any underground parking setback requirements, allowing the ramps to be shared for traffic flow, better traffic flow, as this comes in the continuity between the underground connectivity between the underground parking garages. So we don't put anything on the street at different places in the future, as well as what y'all are looking at today. So make sure that we do that. And so would create more space and promote ease of access and underground parking for the area. So really, I think the point is that the underground parking in this area should be approached with a neighborhood perspective, as y'all continue to talk about, and make sure there's no spillover in parking, as y'all are trying to accomplish. And so would y'all have any objections to this type of concept?
I don't think so, Jerry. We are limited into being able to talk about our project and can't control, issues with other people's property necessarily. And while we're looking at Envision Franklin, we had discussions with the city about parking language because we wanted to show that commitment to protecting the neighborhood and self-parking our project, so that we didn't have people worrying about overflow parking and not having enough, and creeping into the neighborhood and that sort of thing. But that's a zoning ordinance issue, not an Envision Franklin issue. So it's something that has to be addressed as part of the zoning with staff, as opposed to this document. And that's something we will be talking with them about as well. I think you've touched on exactly the right issue, in that by the city also requires you to build along Columbia and not have parking there. And because of the size of many of these lots, it just doesn't leave enough room behind them to be able to park it, especially when you see the pictures that are the vision for what they want this area to be. So connectivity is always a good thing. We obviously share your concern and care for the neighborhood and protecting them with the parking. In where we are on this project right now, we don't have the ability to force parking requirements on through the Envision Franklin.
So what I'm saying, to be clear then, is, of course, I am the neighbor,
Mhm.
and we have another property it's just south of here. We are the neighboring partners
Sure.
up front. What I'd like to be able to do is to have those conversations and to look into this.
Yep.
To see, I think if we could do that and figure out a way to have more parking without these setbacks
Yep.
now in the future, and can also maybe even get that done where there's one construction period of time where that might be done instead of multiple construction period times, because this would be developed at some point in time, especially if you're talking about a project like yours that is south of this, and this is between 5 Points and your project. If we can get that done sooner than later, I think it would help the neighborhood understand that we really are committed to the parking issues, trying to deal with the most parking we can get there for development now and for future development, and continue the idea of the walkability, the continuity, and the connectivity underneath and above ground as well. I think it'd be good to try to look at those and maybe deal with staff or planning or whoever that y'all may recommend, that we all can sit down and look at that if y'all would consider that.
Mhm.
Jerry, I can certainly speak for ownership and say we're open to talking and trying to figure out proactive ways. As you know, between Church Street, where you are, and the edge of our property, there are 2 other owners. So there are 4 owners in those 4 parcels there, us being one of them. And if we can work with those folks, we're more than happy to, help push changes to zoning code or building code. We're as long as it, like you said, as long as it benefits the neighborhood, I think we're game.
I saw the thing. Somebody asked, "Were we the lube corner?" We are the lube corner. They're on that corner property, and so I appreciate that, Devin, because we're more than agreeable to sit down with you guys and try to explore these. And I think, as mass is concerned, between your property and my property, we by far cover the most square footage.
Mm-hmm.
Remaining,
I don't think we're going to go under the bank. I think we're a little late on that, and then any further would be a new block. So,
so we're
have
just
another section.
Exactly. So we're just between Church Street,
coming
all the way down to Blackburn, where you are. So in those 2 block areas, if we could deal with the overall parking in that area, I think it would be better for Cummings Street. It would be better to go ahead and figure out where the ramps might be, how much parking, what we can build, what will be built now and in the future, and be addressing some of those issues today, rather than waiting for them to come up later and be problematic.
Yep.
Matt,
anything else?
We had Haddock popped up one question while Jerry was talking about there's significant flooding problems on 5th Avenue South along and north of Church Street. Supposedly this will be alleviated when Church Street is redone, but that won't happen for about 4 years. It seems like the extensive underground parking would impact this. All I can say right now is we are doing those geotechnical studies and we'll design and engineer it. We're downhill of that area. So I think as they capture it, it should help alleviate some of the stormwater that even reaches our site. But I think most of the underground water we're seeing is independent of that stormwater that comes from the north and from the surface sinking down. It's more what might be there underground now. Adam, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I would say I mean, we can't answer definitively without really doing all the studies, but overland flooding as it relates to like flood plains that you see around rivers, and then underground groundwater tables, they're linked, but they're 2 separate issues and they're handled in 2 separate ways. And so digging a parking garage does not directly impact floodplain management as you would think along a river basin. And so I don't know if that directly answers that question, but I see where they say 5th and Church as you're heading probably towards the Harpeth River. And it also requires the knowledge of what is the flooding caused from? Is it because there's a pipe backed up? Is it because there's a pipe too small? Or is it truly the Harpeth River coming out of its banks and flooding that area? So there's more to it than that. But what I can tell you is that parking garages do exist near floodplain areas. there are ways to manage both of those. Those are looked at as two different things. So there's groundwater, parking garage is kind of one category, and then there's overland flooding, and they don't necessarily impact each other all the time. So, but it is something that we have to look at, and that will definitely be addressed through the engineering of the site.
Peter popped in a question about what kind of retail would face Cummins from what we know now. I don't think we know specifically this early in the job, and Devin, you may be the one to be able to address that better.
Certainly anything on the Cummins side would be lighter traffic. And that's by nature that the most valuable retail is facing Columbia, where eyeballs are and where cars are. Retailers want to be in front of as many people a day as possible. So I think you could probably anticipate there being something more akin to what I call office retail, an insurance agent, an architecture firm, maybe an engineering firm, somebody who might value a front door on the street, but isn't necessarily as much come and go. There will be something there retail wise, but that would be from us, from a leasing perspective, where we would put our less active tenants.
Okay, believe it or not, Amy was kind enough to add a comment. Thank you for the meeting. We look forward to hearing more about the project in the future. Amy, thank you for coming, and thank all of you for coming and asking so many great questions. We hope to get through this first pass and keep working on the project and developing those details that give you all the answers to the questions that you've asked tonight. So if there's anything else, anybody feel free to unmute and chime in. I don't see anything else in the chat, but if not, then thank y'all for coming, and you gave us a lot of time tonight. We appreciate it, and we look forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.